Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about the existence or maybe the lack of Part 21 proportionality. My talk will cover 6 areas. First, I will introduce some consideration regarding what means small and medium design organization approval. Secondly, I will talk about the proportionality of the DOE team leader based on the size of the organization. Third, I will review the main issues in audits and I will propose some possible solutions for them. Fourth, I'll share our experience in the level of involvement during the certification processes and its effectiveness and impact on operational efficiency. Fifth, I will discuss our perspective and concern regarding the implementation of the safety management system in our organization. And finally, I will provide a short overview of the development plans to address the information security management system. So now let's start with the first point. Yes. Because before delving into the topic of proportionality, let me first clarify what constitutes a medium and small site design organization approval. It is a design organization approval with less than 215 employees. Take into account that a small design organization approval could have around 20 employees. It possesses specific terms of approval for modification and repairs. That means we are highly specialized in one area of the aircraft modification. We mostly engage in minor changes and a few STCs per year, and we may subcontract some important role like a head of independent system monitoring or a CVE, but most of us doesn't subcontract at all. Okay. Now let's turn to proportionality of the team leaders. There is only one Part 21 with its subpart J, providing a limited flexibility for team leaders in their interpretation. Nevertheless, I want to highlight some concerns in the lack of consistency among team leaders in their interpretation of the Part 21. The first concern is the inconsistency in finding across different design organizations. We've noticed these inconsistencies in some specific areas, like I will provide some examples. The type of the digital signature, it may change. The content of the compliance documentation, as you may know, and for sure the classification of minor modification. These inconsistencies lead to inefficiencies and confusion during the certification process. We think that when team leaders raise a finding, it is crucial that they check internally if these findings aren't specific to just one DOA. When I say check internally, that means with other team leaders, with the section manager, because these findings might be an indicative of broader issues across multiple design organization approval. And it is essential that team leaders create a level playing field and equal opportunities for all the design organization approval. It is also important to note that this issue of the inconsistency isn't limited to team leader, but it also extends to product certification manager and expert at work. Moreover, the team leader should their focus should shift towards systematic issues rather than individual mistakes in administrative process, such as form filling, use of old template instead of the last one, because minor error on form can result in a significant administrative workload, consuming valuable time that could be better spent in adworthiness issues. All of you may know how much time it takes to fulfill a finding template from EASA. And next is the interpretation of the 21 part varies across team leaders. And sometimes a change in the team leader in an organization can result in a different interpretation and business limitation that were acceptable under the previous leader. It is essential for DOEs not to experience this significant change between team leaders. They should all adhere to a consistent and unified focus. And finally, the reclassification request to EASA. The big issue is it takes an exorbitant amount of time which doesn't match with the industry necessities. It is often quite challenging to reach the team leader since they are away on mission most of the time, also the necessary expert. And they don't usually consider how critical the changes are. We suggest a more efficient approach and a faster answer within less than 1 week. Additionally, when we engage in the discussion, in the classification discussion, we perceive that discussion lacks on depth and feedback seems more like a personal opinion than a thorough analysis. And finally, we have suffered that after consulting EASA for a modification classification, which may result in a major classification, we found that other design organization approval may have offered the same modification as minor to the same customer. So we lost a customer for this unfair approach. Our point is we don't perceive apparent consequence for this design organization approval. In conclusion, it is recommended that effort to be made to standardize the interpretation and application of Part 21 across design organization approval. A lack of a unified voice within EASA creates confusion and complicates interaction with the industry. Now let's turn to the next point, which is EASA audits, because the purpose of this point is to discuss a more efficient approach for internal auditing for a small and medium design organization. The first issue that I would like to address is the redundancy consent. Because team leader and head of independent system monitoring share and often follow the same audit questionnaire. With this information, the design organization approval is really pre-audited by the head of independent system monitoring before the team leader audit. However, team leader is not using this information at all, and he's repeating the audit again. Consequently, we face two identical audits with some various, the change with me in the project selected for it. We think that the solution may be that team leaders should focus on educating and using the head of independent system monitoring as an effective tool for tooling instead of doing the audit themselves. This could potentially lead to a reduction of EASA audits, for example, instead every year after 2 or 3 years. And also will reduce redundancies and align audit risk assessment. For this, EASA team leader should compile a list of audit focuses and should share with the head of independent monitoring to guide him in the audits. Afterward, EASA should gather the finding, the comment, the observation of the audits, and it should be checked across the board to find systematic error that can be used to guide all the design organization. Okay. The next point, the next issue I would like to raise is repetitive checklist. Concerns arise about repetitive checklists for mature organization. We receive the same checklist sometimes every 3 years with questions that have not significantly changed. Those, for example, related to classification of change and repair, competitive evaluation of subcontractor and staff, and the system of compliance checklists. This becomes a time-consuming and a redundant exercise. Moreover, for mature organizations, that we have suffered a thorough audit of handbook and procedure that have not been changing along the time because we don't update all the procedures every year. So team leaders should ideally focus solely on projects that are checking and revising handbooks and procedures repeatedly. This practice is especially relevant when a new team leader assumes the role, as unnecessary checks are introduced to conform personal preference. In essence, let's simplify internal audits, making it more efficient, reducing redundancy, and aligning audits with real organization needs and risks. Okay, so now let's turn to the next point, which is our experience with the level of involvement, because I want to share some observation and concern regarding how we use the level of involvement as part of our certification program. Low preparation. We consistently prepare the level of involvement as part of our certification program without added a significant effort. While we receive comments from EASA on adjusting the level of involvement for some certification design items, there has not been feedback on the level of the LOI itself from PCM or experts. So the discussion is always along the CDIs. And despite the level of involvement change, the workload remains consistent and the proposed document for EASA review remain largely unchanged. Inconsistencies in EASA involvement. There are 4 levels of involvement. As we have our experience, we learned from our experience that first level doesn't imply EASA review of the documentation. Nevertheless, if an expert wants to check it, they will propose you to go up with the level of involvement to level 2, and that's all. Between level 2 and level 3 levels, the distinction between them doesn't not seem to impact EASA involvement significantly. We don't perceive any difference, but this may be due to the release of a few documents for each CDI. So, finally, level 4, we have covered, is not, we have faced it when we are using a project, a pilot project for a new scope, is when we face the level 4. So most of the time we are around level 2 and level 3. And for this reason, there is a perception that some project certification manager and expert at EASA are intended to review all aspects as usual, undermining the intended purpose of the level of involvement. Last point is our limited perceived of benefits. To date, the benefits from the level of involvement are minimal in terms of altering the STC review and the approval process. Given our DOA profile, engaging in a few STCs, the level of involvement seems to add unnecessary complexity and delay without substantial benefits. And I would like to call for feedback from EASA, because we would like to receive feedback on the impact of the level of involvement system across design organization approval, specifically understanding how many DOAs have received extra privilege or reducing significantly workload as a result of the level of involvement. Okay. Let's continue. Good. Now I want to share our perspective and concern regarding the implementation of the safety management system in our design organization approval. First point is the lack of guidance. Currently, we have initiated our safety management system implementation based on unlimited guidance. What I want to say with limited guidance? Because we already know that there are thousands and hundreds of information available in EASA and in other organizations. But as a small design organization approval, we neither have the resources nor the capability to dig and explore all these documentations. We expect that EASA will provide a concise and tailored regulation for our understanding. We were waiting further information, especially from part 2 of the acceptable means of compliance, that fortunately they were released last week, so we will check in deep to streamline our efforts and avoid unnecessary burdens. Regarding the small DOA challenges, as a small company, the SMS appears to be more an administrative workload than a tangible contribution to safety. For instance, aspects like anonymous reporting may be less practical in a smaller team when openness is feasible, as may be difficult to remain openness is feasible. Yes, it might be difficult to remain anonymous in our organization. Moreover, the creation of safety performance indicator KPIs poses a challenge in terms of relevance and assessment, because we face a few projects per year. Our third concern is the lack in team leader interpretation. We are notable concerned that team leaders are granted too much autonomy in its interpretation. Also, if they rely on basic requirement lists, can impose a substantial administrative burden without apparent benefit for us. The smaller DOAs possess a significant advantage in that we have the entire staff present on a daily or weekly basis, facilitating real-time discussion on safety issues. Wait, no, sorry. Excuse me. The last point is administrative versus real contribution. We are starting to implement our safety management system. Just a few companies have deployed them, so our feedback is still a little bit short, but I would like to share two things. That we have noted a positive impact on supplier management, providing better control over audits. However, this remains the only evident benefit, and the overall impact on safety contribution remains unclear. The second point, we have companies with design organization approval and production organization approval. As you know, EASA oversees the process of implementation of the SMSs for the design organization, and the national authorities oversees the implementation for the production authorities organization approval. We want to have one single manual for both departments, but we already see that some regulations are differently interpreted between EASA and the national authorities. In light of this consideration, we propose that EASA provides a clear guidance, especially tailored to the challenges faced by the small design organization approval. We hope for a balance where SMS is not only a regulatory burden, but also a meaningful enhancement to safety practice. And now let's move to the last point, which is the information security management system. First, I'd like to discuss the launch of the information security management system activities in September 2023, so last month, particularly the pilot programs. However, based on our challenges with the safety management system pilot programs, and due to the absence of a clear guidance at present afterwards of this pilot program, we are not optimistic about the outcome of the information security management system pilot program. In addition, we haven't engaged in discussion or received much information on the information security management system. This lack of information hinders our ability to provide meaningful comment or insight. We urge EASA to promptly share more information and guidance on this topic for better understanding and an effective industry response. That concludes my talk for today. Thank you for your attention.
Just one point, a question for you, Eva, because you didn't clarify that, but I understand you intervened on behalf of a number of organizations through an association, right?
Sorry, I was a little bit nervous. I belong to a small and medium design organization, represent the 70% of the total approvals issued by EASA. We are all together, we are collaborating in the DOE Alliance, where we share and discuss all these inconsistencies, our problem, and all of you are invited to join to us in the DOE Alliance. If you remember, there was in the bottom part of my presentation the logo, so I will appreciate if you check our webpage, and we are open to add more members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to highlight, before we go to possible questions and comments, the fact that there is a side meeting about LOI this afternoon, so during which you might get some feedback, or some of us here, about the comments you have made. So do we have some person from the audience who would like to intervene directly with the microphone first, or do we go directly to Slido?
If I may, Nicolas,
yes?
The section managers might have a first reaction. It's a lot of feedback for us, very interesting. Thanks a lot for that. But some of the points were directly addressed to EASA with some direct questions to us. So we don't intend to go through the whole list of points, but there were one or two quick answers that we can provide. So I'll give the floor to Manfred and Juan.
Okay, no, so thank you for all the recommendations and suggestions and all the concerns. Of course, we will take them into account, and we have to, of course, discuss internally. For many of those aspects, we cannot reply right now what is the solution or what we are going to do, because it will take some internal discussions. Regarding the last point on ISMS, and I will cover it a bit later in the presentation. The AMC material is already out, the acceptable means of compliance. So it's not the same situation as with safety management systems. With safety management systems, there was a delay in the availability of the AMC. For ISMS, it's already out. We have more time to prepare for the pilot projects. So for the pilot projects for ISMS, we also have, or we will have the support of our colleagues from the cybersecurity section. And it should be better than what happened with SMS. Okay, so for ISMS, it should be better. And the plan is to start already either before the end of the year or beginning of next year with those pilot projects. For some organizations already started last year. But we will have more time. So hopefully it will go better for that. So this was.
We would really appreciate it to have better information for this topic.
Yeah, and the AMC and the guidance is already available, and as I will mention later, there is a plan for a big workshop in the second half of this year. I mean next year.
Good.
Thank you, Juan. Maybe Manfred, if you want to add something.
Yes, also from my side, thank you for the items. For sure, there's a lot to discuss internally. Some of the items are actually more on the certification side, so that's on the other side. We have to coordinate the answers here. About standardization, about proportionality, this is always a little bit tricky. It's a wide theme where we can discuss for weeks, I guess. It's mainly a subject of the company, what the company is doing. And by that, you have to take into account, if you go in this, really what's the subject of the company. Because a small company can do big things. I know companies with 5 people doing twin-engine aircraft. I know companies with 10 people doing only minor changes. So it's not necessarily the size of the company you have to take into account. It's the activity of the company, the scope of the company you have to take into account. Here I have one point in return to industry. Industry is pushing us to standardization, because industry is comparing themselves always with the others, not knowing all the bits and pieces of the others. And this makes it completely tricky to say, hey, you use here a different approach than here. Because yes, we do. Because here there are some different things than there. And if you push us too much to standardization, we have no proportionality anymore, or the proportionality is shrinking. So those are all the items we have to take into account. It's unfortunately, or luckily, because this makes it interesting, not that easy, not that straightforward to address all the different items. So yes, we take this back. We will coordinate between our different DOA team leaders within EASA, also with the certification colleagues, and we will come back on that in more details.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and many of the proposals you have made are also very beneficial for us, because it will improve our efficiency. I mean, we avoiding duplication of audits or checklists and those things. So this is something we have to evaluate. Sometimes we have certain restrictions because, unfortunately, we have to put a new DOA team leader for an organization because the person is not here anymore. And it's not easy to follow the same approach with the different DOA team leaders. So this is something where we have to work.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I would like to ask Gilles Fontaine to raise his hand because, sorry, you were too close. Can you please be more specific? I'm not sure that the question on Slido is enough.
Actually, what we haven't been reported by Eva is basically that EASA is still performing compliance-based oversight over at least all the the DOA part of the DOA Alliance. And so the question, which is not a brand new question, which is there on the table for years, what about no more compliance-based oversight over the DOA community, but a performance-based oversight by EASA over the DOA community?
So who wants to answer?
If I may, even if I'm the last to answer, I think this is something that surely we are working, and we have started to work. Recently, we have appointed a group on risk-based oversight, but you have to consider also the performance of the company. And there are still, when we are doing risk-based oversight, there will be companies that will deserve a compliance oversight because they are not mature enough. And this is part of the assessment. So it is always important to consider that EASA can standardize when also you are more or less performing well. Otherwise, we have to adapt our assessment, our oversight to the company. And this is where you are different. Definitely. As any other human organization.
If I may add here, because this was also one point of the presentation, to have the ISM supporting our audits more or less, or that we trust the ISM to a certain extent and we go back here. This is actually what we have discussed internally during the last 1.5 to 2 years. And this is one of the items we can do. If we know that the ISM is really working well, then we can go only on a very high level in the different areas, and this is what we have started to do. So we are moving in this direction, but as Francesco is saying, this is coming also from both sides. Some companies we are more on the performance-based side. Some companies we are really more on the compliance demonstration side. But this is a direction we want to go.
Okay, thank you. Floris, I'm sorry, my Dutch is not good enough so that I can pronounce your last name. There is a question here which states, in what sense have you seen an improvement of supplier control and how did SMS contribute to this? I would guess that the question is directed to Mrs. Juan Otero.
Yes, as we have to check how to explain it. Okay, SMS. Some procedures of SMS are linked to the development or the product done by our supplier. So we have to increase the detail on the audits, and we are checking more aspect also for comply. If you identify some risks and later you have to follow them, and you have some KPI according to them, they will force you to perform a more exhaustive audit. So this is the reason that we are gathering more information, and we have now more control over our supplier.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from the audience? You can still have, I think, one question here. Otherwise, we perhaps take another question from Slido before the break. Gregory, is it okay? So there is one question from Alain Petremont from Air France about whether or not there is an overlapping between the DOA team leader and the head of independent safety monitoring. So could you confirm or not? So I think Manfred might be for you.
Yes, this is the item I mentioned before, that we really make use of the ISM. To a certain extent, you're right. There is the approach is a different one. Nevertheless, the ISM has to check all the processes, procedures. If there are any troubles, if there are gaps or whatever, and of course, this is something where there is a certain overlap. Because of course we check the systems, we check the work instructions, whether this is really implemented. It's not only the paper, it's also the implementation. And here are actually some overlap. And this is the overlap where we can make use of the work of the ISM. This is the way we go. We will look into this more deeply over the time. It will take for sure a little bit time to be really into that, but this is what we have started now.
Yeah. So also it's very important for us to know first how the head of the independent system monitoring is identifying the flaws within the organization. So, I mean, if we ask them, okay, how many findings you have raised internally, and we find, okay, 3-4 findings, and we go there a couple of hours and we identify 10, we say, okay, maybe we cannot rely a lot on, and then we have a significant problem with the organization. So at the end it will be first we have to know how they are working. And regarding the comment, this is the basis of the approvals from EASA, not only for design, also for maintenance, for all the others. We give privileges to, I mean, you have privileges, the organizations, but there are different safety nets in the way. So you have your internal quality system, your audits, you have the oversight by a national authority or by EASA. In maintenance, you have, or in the operators, you have also airworthiness reviews of aircraft. You have continuing airworthiness monitoring by the authorities. So there are different safety nets, and all of them are important. Of course, we can rely on how good your internal system is, but first we have to know how good it is.
Yes, I want to clarify that I told for mature organization. So for sure, I understand that not all organizations, depending the size, could have this maturity. So first, take into account the maturity of organization to like a next step of relying on them. And second, there are some design organization approval that subcontract the head of independent system monitoring. So he's outside the organization, and sometimes this type of person is working in several different design organization approval. So in this case, is outside the organization, he's auditing different organizations, for example, in Europe. So most of the time is very similar, the workload of this head of independent system monitoring, that the team leader. So this is for this mature organization, subcontracting head of independent system monitoring, and we understand that not all design organizations are the same, not all doing the same in the same way. So for sure, I understand it.
If I may, just to give you an example, a concrete example, so that you understand also the ideas. If the ISM has raised a finding internally and we agree to the finding, we agree to the way forward of the finding, we don't raise a finding on our side because this would be duplication. And here, of course, we then go together with the ISM, so they have to keep us informed. But again, we go with them and we don't duplicate. Just a small example where we can really benefit from them.
Thank you.
Very last comment.
Yeah, very quickly, we'll have to close. So quickly, please.
Yes, very quickly, because it is my question. So just I say that I don't expect from EASA that are making the jobs that we are doing internally. I expect from EASA when they are making the oversight that provide us with a complement that we are not doing and not doing the same job that we have already did.
Yes, true. We don't want to duplicate, absolutely. And on the other side, of course, there are certain overlap, and this is exactly the area where we can benefit from each other.
Thank you, Alain, and thank you, Manfred. So this concludes the first part of the morning session. We'll now go for a coffee break.